Hey folks, Everyone Loves Pirates here, and if you've been watching my Dwarf Fortress Adventure mode videos, you'll know, especially in my Goblin Tamer adventure, that I ran into a bug in the game, one that's quite well known apparently in adventure mode, where goblins just take over the world. So you'll have goblin populations in the multiple tens of thousands, and they tend to stay at their dark fortresses and stuff. So you'll have dark fortresses that have 10,000 plus goblins in them, even after just, very short period of time. And they also have troll populations that are way too large as well. So the problem with this is obviously if you're trying to go to one of these locations, maybe you have a quest to rescue a poor little kidnapped child, you're going to get there and the game's going to just come to a grinding halt. You'll get 1 frame per second if you're lucky on a high-end machine, and it's really painful, and there's really no way to play it that way. Of course, maybe you could go into DF hack or something and, kill off the entire population, but how can we generate worlds that are a little more fair, a little more balanced, where goblins aren't crazy overtaking the world? So this video is basically going to tell you or show you how I've come to the solution I've come to. And it's not a perfect solution by any means. And I'll be telling you why that's the case. It's basically impossible to have a solution that's going to work particularly well in the current state of the game. But I did get some help from one of my viewers who left me some comments on the research that he did. And that prompted me to spend a few hours looking into this. In fact, more than a few hours, way too much time. But I read the forums, new posts, old posts. I read the bug tracker. I read the wiki, and I learned what kind of works and what absolutely doesn't work, even though it sounds like it should work. And I'd like to share that with you. So hopefully, if you're having this same problem, you'll be able to maybe get a world generation that works better for you. So let's start off by looking at a couple files. There's 2 files that we're going to need to edit for most of this stuff. Here's our just in your Dwarf Fortress starter pack, if you're using the starter pack, which I imagine a lot of you are, we need to go into the actual Dwarf Fortress folder where all the game files are. And I have mine sorted by date modified, and you'll see why later on. But we need to go into our raw folder, and then we want to go into the objects folder. And the 2 files we're looking for are creature standard.txt. This is where the settings are for all your kind of main creatures like goblins and dwarfs and humans and stuff. And our entity default, which is basically how it defines those races, where they live, what sort of items they use, and that sort of thing. So let's start with creature standard. I'm going to use Notepad++ to look at this. Use whatever you're comfortable with. You can use just regular Notepad as well, but I find that regular Notepad can mess stuff up occasionally. So we're going to do a search for Goblin just to find it quickly. And here we go. Here's where all the goblins' natures are. One of the things that you will see on the forums, they'll say, get rid of no drink and no eat, because that will help the goblins keep their populations down if they have to have enough drink and food to support their population. First thing I changed, and it actually had 0 effect for me. You're more than welcome to take that out if you like. I just left it in because, honestly, it didn't do anything for me, and I'll tell you why that's the case later on. So what we want to do is we want to scroll down. You'll see all this set BP stuff. In between set BP and attack, in a lot of the other creatures, you'll see a max age. Goblin does not have max age. I've added it here. And what you can imagine is if they don't have a max age, that they are immortal. And that's the case. They don't die of old age in the game. If you add max age, the game actually will take this into account, which is good because it doesn't take other things into account. So if it's max age, the first age is going to be your minimum age before someone can die of old age. So I have it really low at 5. So I have goblins can die at 5 years old from old age. 60 will be the maximum old age. So no goblin can live past 60. They'll immediately die of old age. I messed around with these numbers. These may not still be the most effective numbers to have, but I kind of ended up there, and I might mess with it later. But those are the ones I have for now. So basically what this allows for is they're not going to live past 60, and they're going to have a almost even likelihood of dying at any time. Down here you have baby and child. babies just, when they reach 1 year old, they stop being a baby, they become a child. When they reach 12, they stop being a child and become an adult. Or maybe I'm wrong, it's 13. But basically, these are the ages that they are babies and child. I mess around with this a lot. In fact, I changed child to 39 at one point and baby to like 20. And I had the max old age is 40. So it basically gave them 1 year that they were an adult, thinking, oh, great, this way they won't be able to have, as many children and stuff. A lot of them die before they could become, actual adults. Didn't help. So I've left these at the normal too. It doesn't really matter, apparently, at all. Here's the kind of main thing in this file that we're going to be looking at is the caste. We have female and male. Normally female is going to say female, I believe, and what is it? It's going to be multiple litters rare is going to be the tag, I believe. And what that tag is supposed to do is keep the female that it's on from having more than a couple kids. Basically, they're going to have one kid, and on rare occasions, they're going to have more than one kid. As you can see, I've gone for a much more specific thing, which is litter size, minimum 0, maximum 1. So I'm saying they can have maybe no kids, but at most 1. Either way, I could probably take this out because, especially with my other settings, but when I went into the game and I actually looked in Legends mode and exported all the information, with either one of those tags, female goblins were still having litters with like up to 10 kids in them. In fact, I saw, I think, 0 litters that only had 1 kid in them. They were almost all at least like 3 or 4. So the game seems to ignore this tag for goblins in particular. The other thing I've done is I've specified a population ratio between the castes. So here we have population ratio of 1, and down under male we have population ratio of 1,000. What this means is for every 1,000 males that are born, 1 female will be born. Effectively, I could have just got rid of the female caste entirely, and if you want to do that, that would probably be fine. Now you think with these settings, if there's only 1 female being born for every 1,000 males, that goblins are just going to die off immediately. And this is the most interesting thing I ran across. I didn't see anyone else kind of looking at female birth rates and all that kind of stuff. And it's very possible that I just missed it. But it seems that goblins are hard-coded in the game just to spawn out of nowhere. So once I did this and I generated a world with a long history, and I looked at the goblins, none of the goblins had mothers or fathers, which makes sense because there are very few females in the society. But there still were tons and tons of goblins, still tens of thousands of goblins that were just coming from nowhere. So because of that, the fact that the game seems to just spawn goblins out of nowhere, just when it thinks they should be born, when they should come into the world, the main thing that's going to make any difference at all is going to be this max age. So the game's just spawning goblins like crazy, maybe trying to make up for the fact that there aren't a lot in the world. But this is the only thing that's really having an effect, is killing them off. And I may even want to make this lower so that they're dying off more frequently. But you'll see later on that we still tend to get kind of an all or nothing thing. I don't have this balance, and I didn't promise I did. But it does give you worlds occasionally that you can play. So we will look at that. But first, what we want to do is look at entity default. So that's my videos. Where is... I closed it, didn't I? Well, fine. We'll do it this way. So the other thing we want to look at is... Never mind, I found it. Is entity default. So if you open that up, I already have it open here, so why worry? And you do a search for Goblin again, no S. This is where the game tells what the goblins can use, basically. So here's the weapons that they can equip, armor they can use, all that sort of stuff. We want to scroll down until we get to this area. So we want to deal with the troll populations too, because you usually see thousands and thousands of troll populations. Now, if you get rid of use cave animals and use evil animals, and in fact, I believe most of the threads said just use evil animals, then supposedly that should keep the goblins from domesticating trolls, and you won't see a bunch of trolls, or maybe any trolls, in the towers. Now, maybe I messed it up, or maybe I missed doing it one time or something like that, but when I did take it away, it didn't seem to actually help with the trolls. So I apologize. Going back to creature standard, Here's how I dealt with the troll population problem. So if we want to search out troll, I just added, here's the multiple letter rare that you'll see for the goblins. I just added these two things, fanciful and does not exist. Does not exist means they do not exist. They will not show up in the game. They will never be born. They will never die. Fanciful means creatures know about trolls. They have an idea of what trolls are. So even if they don't exist, they can still make chiselings of them and talk about them and stuff like that. But it's basically like there are a few other creatures in the game that are fanciful that do not actually exist in the world, but the inhabitants of the world know about them. That's what those two settings do. Interestingly enough, as I said, things were hard-coded into the game. If you add does not exist to goblins, they still exist. It changes absolutely nothing. So goblins existing in world generation, being created in world generation, and spawning in world generation seems to happen no matter what, whether they exist or whether they have females or whatever it happens to be. You're still going to see high goblin populations, which is unfortunate, but that's the reason why don't eat and don't drink and all that stuff don't really seem to make a difference. But age does, which is good, because that does give us something we can work with. We're going to scroll down a little bit further, and here's one of the big things that you're going to see in a lot of the threads is what sites they like and all that. So Dark Fortress is where we have our problem, right? This is where we have tens of thousands of goblins, and we can't move around because the game lags out. So default site type, Dark Fortress. Usually it's going to say like site, Dark Fortress, and tolerate site, Dark Fortress as well. You want to get rid of those, because what it basically means is tolerate means that they can move there, that they will live there. And like site means that they'll actively seek out to live in one of those locations if it's nearby. So if they like Dark Fortress, goblins that aren't in a Dark Fortress even will try to move into the Dark Fortress. So this is going to help keep at least those populations from getting bigger, but they're always going to start really big, it seems. Now I've added some things which I actually didn't see anyone else do yet. Very possible that I missed it, but like, well, let's try to get them away from the Dark Fortress as much as we can. So we're going to have them tolerate stuff like cities, cave detailed, which I found in some other place somewhere. Cave itself, I just added, and camp I added. I don't know if camp is even like an actual tag, but it seems to work. Cave I saw somewhere else, but I haven't seen anything where it was camp. Even checked the wiki and stuff. There doesn't seem to be anything about this exact tag. So I guess that camp would work. I never would have thought of cave detail because I found that somewhere else. But basically with these settings, it's going to tolerate all these. And they're actively, if one's nearby, they're going to try to move, hopefully from the Dark Fortress to a cave, detailed, regular cave, or a camp. And this seems to play out. It seems to only play out with small populations of goblins. So if you have still large goblin populations during generation, it won't really help out that much, but that may be because of some of the other settings. You guys might be able to find things that work even better for this. But that's kind of what we're doing here. Now, here are some things that you would think would help a lot. So we have max starting civ number. Basically, I won't really explain that in detail. It doesn't really seem to matter that much. But it's going to say, it's not going to try to make a whole lot of Dark Fortresses. Max population number and max site population number, the game ignores almost entirely, it seems, for goblins. So even with the max site population number of 80 or even 0, you're still going to see sites that have Dark Fortresses that have tens of thousands of goblins in them. It's still going to happen. Why? I have some ideas about that, but apparently we're stuck with that. So these are the settings that I'm currently using in generation. So let's actually look at generating a couple worlds. So I have Dwarf Fortress running already. We're going to design a new world with advanced parameters because that will let me be a little more specific about some things. Some of these settings seem to matter. So as you can see, I made a couple small region things. I just copied small region here. Just by hitting C, it goes down there. I renamed them for what they are. So here's one that does 200 years of world generation. This one does 500 years of world generation. So if we look at either one of this is the 200. As you can see, end year 200. And here's the 500. They're identical except for how long they go. Some of this stuff, maybe the embark points could still change. I actually don't really remember what that is. I didn't change it, so maybe it doesn't matter. Site population after civilization creation, I've taken down to 80, much like we did in the other file. Doesn't really seem to have... They still don't pay attention to this number, but it does seem to have some sort of effect. I think the one that's having the biggest effect, though, is population cap after civ creation. I have it 3,000. I think this is what's giving me the smaller goblin populations when I get them. However, I'm still occasionally going to be getting ones that have high goblin populations. So I'm going to hit F6 just to save it, because it's going to annoy me. It's going to keep on asking. And let's generate a 200-year small region. As you can see, it's going to go very fast, because the dead figures is going to stay fairly close to the alive historical figures. This isn't total population, mind you. These are just historical figures. It used to be every character, everything that was alive was a historical figure, but that's not the case anymore. So once we have this done, we're going to hit the P button to export some information about this world before we accept it. And we are going to go back into our folder. We're going to go back to Dwarf Fortress, and this is why I have it at, what is that called? Sorted by date modified. So at the very top is going to be the most recent one that we do. And we want to look at world sites and populations. World sites and pops.txt. And open that up. And as you can see, we got almost 20,000 goblins. So it did not work for this one. So I'm going to close that and just hit abort. And I'm going to start another one. Now the interesting thing is I have much better luck with longer generations. Because the game just has so many goblins when it starts up. Just kind of hard-coded into the game. So we're going to hit the P button to... I got to get rid of that folder because I'm going to keep on clicking it. And it's just going to just go there. That seemed like the exact same number. Did P not work? I think that was the same. Okay. So we had... Oh, I accepted that. Darn it. Apparently I'm going to make all sorts of mistakes today. Okay, let's go back. So what I found is with the shorter amount of years, I had to do probably like 5 generations before I got one that didn't have overwhelming goblin population. Because they need to die out from old age, but also from war, and they need to have their starting... They're really only going to start with 1 goblin fortress with my settings. Dark Fortress, but they need one that's near other sites so that they actually leave it and go to those sites. So let's hit P for this one as well. Let's bring up... Oh yeah, now it's region 6 because we accidentally accepted the other one. So now we got down to 14. Let's try one more at 200 years, and then I'm going to show you 500 years because that one seems to be a much more effective time to generate for me and not have a fortress full of goblins. Okay, so now we got it down actually to just 1,000 goblins, which is pretty good. So what, that was 4 generations before we got this. Very small number of dwarfs, decent amount of humans, and mostly elves. So we can do just a quick search for goblins and see where they are. So we have a cave. You can see it worked. We got 34 goblins in this cave. The goblins own the cave. They got some cave swallows and stuff like that in there, and bats and stuff. Okay, here's another cave that has 20 goblins in it. Here's a dark pits. It's going to have 84 goblins in it. And the interesting thing is the dark pits, which is what surrounds the dark fortress, actually seem to pay attention to the limits that you put on them. I've never seen one that had more than like 80-something, 100 goblins in it. So another dark pits. Basically, I think what we have is everyone's going to move out of the top, the tower into the fortress into the dark pits or surrounding like hillocks and stuff. Hillocks are what dwarfs live in. So we have 65 goblins in there. Here's a fortress of some sort that's actually owned by elves, but has some goblins in it. And here's the dark fortress. And it has about 500 goblins in it, which is pretty much the number you're probably looking for. I would love to actually go back to that. Let's search back up. Okay, so and actually, as you can see, there's a dark fortress. It doesn't have any ogres in it. You'll still see some high amounts of ogres. Ogres sometimes kind of take the place of trolls, but it has no trolls because trolls don't exist in this world. some animated goblins in a necromancer tower. Another fortress that's actually owned by dwarfs but has a small population of goblins in it. Some more dark pits with, once again, less than 100 goblins in it. So you can see it took a couple generations, but we got really a world that would be pretty good for adventure mode. Now, I want to talk really quick about why I think these things are hard-coded in. So before adventure mode was fleshed out, before it was even a thing, Dwarf Fortress, the fortress mode, really needed to know that there were going to be goblins that were going to attack. That was like the whole point of the fortress, was after a year, you're going to have your defenses up because you're going to be attacked by goblins. So I believe that's why goblins were made immortal. I believe that's why that they are just kind of spawned and why there's tens of thousands of them, is so that you always have some sort of chance and risk that the goblins will actually come. With this sort of generation, I think you'd be okay still, but occasionally you'll see generations with these settings. I'll do a couple more with the 500, where there's very little amount of goblins, just a handful kind of. And that would probably make fortress mode somewhat dull if you're expecting to have goblin invasions and sieges to be just kind of the main thing that pushes the game along. Of course, a whole lot of other stuff has been added to the game since, since even when I started playing, who even knows now, maybe close to 10 years ago, because I think the game's like 12 years, so maybe like 7, 8 years ago. You need something to, keep it interesting. And back in the day, it was just goblins. So I think that's why it's at a lower level, that it's kind of somewhere in the game, it's fudged, it's hard-coded, so that there's always going to be goblins there to attack your fortress. And I think that's why changing some of these settings isn't actually effective, and why you have to go to kind of long links to keep the population down. Okay, so what you can also do here, if you accept this, if you see one that you want to look at more detail than just looking at the regions, that was the previous one, instead of just looking at the text file, which can be difficult sometimes to go through. If you accept the world, it'll make it as a region. There it is. And we can go into Legends mode. And once again, you have the same export thing. You can hit P to export that old information, or you can hit X to do an XML dump. And once we do that, we can bring open Lazy New Pack, use our utilities, double click on Legends Viewer, drag that in, and then we can open up Region 6 XML file. It'll take a few moments, depending on how fast your computer is, how much information is in there. And then we can go to sites. We can actually just look at all populations where all the goblins happen to be. And you'll see this is where all the goblins are. And we can click on each one. This is a dark fortress. This is our one that has about 500 goblins in it. You can look at kind of the history of it as well, but I kind of want to show you what I was talking about. So here's a goblin. We can mouse over, and it's going to tell us a lot of stuff about these goblins just by mousing over. You're going to see that pretty much all of them are going to be male, because we're only going to have 1 in 1,000 that are going to be female. And if we look at these goblins, none of them are going to have a family history, or very few are, but I imagine none of these are. This is still really early in the game, so these might actually have a chance of having a family history. So this was in 73, and the starting creatures in the game start before your generation point. They'll start before year 0, and go from there. So in 73, none of our goblins can live past 60, right? So we can look at this guy. He was born in 71 and died in 82. He was actually killed. But despite being born after world generation, he still doesn't have a father or a mother. If we look at, that's the same guy. If we look at another guy, maybe that's, here's one that lived a little longer. These guys were attacked. If we go look at this guy, man, these elves were killing goblins left and right. Tiger did that one. I'm trying to find ones that died of old age. There we go. There's a guy that died of old age. So he lived 12 years and then died of old age. Once again, still doesn't have a family history or anything. No children, nothing. And you're going to see all these goblins are going to be male, and they're going to die either from old age or a fight, but they can die of old age, and they're not going to have families. If we look at maybe some of these, if we find some of these elves or something. Let's just look in a different. Here's a cave. Just find a town or something. Here we go. A bunch of dwarfs and stuff in here. So if we just scroll down kind of in the middle somewhere, look at a dwarf. See here, it'll say related entities. Actually, wait, he doesn't have a family either. Okay. There we go. Related historical figures is what we want. So he has a mother and a father. If you look at the mother, you'll see that the mother has a spouse and then 4 children. That's the story stuff you'd see with the other goblins as well, but you'd see really large litters. Not that this is a small one. But you'll see most characters do have fathers and mothers, but none of the goblins will, because they're basically just coming out of nowhere. Father and mother as well here. Once again, multiple children, all that kind of stuff. So let's look real quick at designing a world that's 500 years long. Same settings, everything, just a longer generation. Once again, because the civilization cap, the overall population cap is kept low, and we don't have these immortal characters so much. We do in the elves, I believe, are immortal as well. It's gonna generate very quickly. It actually doesn't slow down, where normally you're gonna have it start chugging after like 100 years. So let's hit P here, and let's go back to our folder. It's gonna be Region 7. Open it up, and well, there you go. You got 20,000 goblins. So let's give it one more shot or two. Just to kind of show you what can happen with the longer generations. It seems to be they either stick really well, like those 20,000, or they tend to spread out and die off and get attacked and stuff like that, which is what you want. You want more history. And I bet if we have more events, you'll probably see lower amounts of goblins. So we'll open that up. Well, 20,000 goblins, no elves. All the elves were killed, and 20 dwarfs are left in this world. You can get some interesting stuff. I'm just going to do this a couple more times. Just hopefully we'll see one that has a low amount of goblins in it. It's going to be about the same amount of events for this one. But since the elves were wiped out last time, we'll see what happens to goblins. Okay, so this time the goblins were basically wiped out. And we have a lot of humans, a lot of elves, and the dwarfs were completely wiped out. So you can see why there might be some of this stuff hard-coded in the game, and why the default settings are the way they are, because in this way you do get populations die out. But that also means some interesting history, I think. Obviously, if you want to play as a dwarf, you want to play from this world. But as I close, we'll just look at one last one. So there's certainly reasons why the game is set up the way it is. And I think those reasons are pretty much all for Fortress mode. So this is something you may want to only do if you're going to use a world specifically for adventure mode. Or you just may find that you have to do a lot of generations before you find a world that's acceptable for both Fortress mode and adventure mode. Hit P one last time for this one. Check it out. Once again, a lot of goblins. So it's not particularly efficient or effective. You have to do quite a few generations. And I think it could be tweaked quite a bit still, but I don't think in its current state the game's ever going to be able to get it consistently good at keeping the goblin populations down in general, and then also keeping them from congregating all in like 1 or 2 sites where you just have way too many goblins and you can't do what you can't visit at all. So unfortunately, I think we're going to have to wait just for the next version, or maybe in a potential version after that, depending on how ingrained these settings happen to be in the game, or whether Toady sees it as a bug at all. But it is on the bug list and in multiple places, actually. So it is known of, and hopefully we'll see a better solution. But here you go. Here's the solution that I've come up with so far. I might do another episode on this if I come up with some better settings. But the way it is now, I can spend, I don't know, 10, 15 minutes kind of generating worlds until I find one that I like. And I have found some pretty interesting worlds. And in fact, I may end up, if I still have Legend Viewer up, I may end up sticking with this one just based on the way it is. Because this is... It's a pretty decent Dark Fortress with only 500 goblins in it. Unfortunately, they have no prisoners in here, so kind of on its own, it's kind of useless too. But playing a fortress for a while, especially near a dwarf fortress, near this dark fortress, could be interesting. I like this world too. Look at that. It's kind of, you have these mountains, and then there's this little island of land in here that has some dwarf settlements and some evil lands and stuff. This could be pretty entertaining world to play on. So once again, thanks for watching. Hopefully this has helped you out. If you have any comments, if you've come up with anything after you've messed around with it that you think I should check out, I'd love to hear about it. If you have any further questions, if you don't understand something, I'll do my best to answer your questions. And hopefully this will help you enjoy your adventure mode in Dwarf Fortress, at least this version of Dwarf Fortress, when you play. So thanks for watching, folks. I will see you all in the next video of, well, Dwarf Fortress, hopefully. Bye-bye.